You're listening to the Point. Ready or not, let's keep it real at Turning Point.
Life happens, real issues, real life. We all have those unexpected events that happen. The point is to be able to have meaningful conversations. Ready or not, let's get to the point of understanding more about the darkness of sexual assault from women who have been there and are now on the other side of the statistic. Every 98 seconds, another person experiences sexual assault, and this is just in our country alone. So while you and I are here today in this 15-minute time span, 9 people will become a victim of sexual assault. 90% of these will be women. Welcome to The Point. I'm Debbie Taylor, your host. I'm the director of Turning Point. Here with us is Sherry Love, who is the Turning Point nurse manager, along with Juliana, who has been a victim of assault herself.
Juliana, we have seen more clients come through our doors than you would think that question whether or not they have been assaulted. What do you think about that statement?
Listening to that statement, I remember it doesn't surprise me because in my own experience, I had the notion that I wasn't assaulted. Mm-hmm. I think as our society, we minimize it a lot. And we try to make it okay, and that's not just society, that's our own brains going into survival mode. It makes me sad about this statement, a little angry, but also not surprised.
Right. Yeah.
Do you think part of that is that statistics tell us 7 out of 10 rapes or assaults are committed by somebody people know? Do you think that's the hardest part?
Honestly, thinking about it, I think it has a good majority of why that's a true statement. I think we don't realize that when it's someone we know, sometimes it's someone you know really, really well, that affects us in a way where there's so many other things that go into it. Guilt and shame, and you just don't want to point a finger, I guess. It's weird. It's hard.
Right. Some girls have told me that they think that they had a part in that happening to them.
Yeah, and that's like a common notion that's put out in society. Thankfully now, I think more light has been shed on it as it's been coming into more women standing up, not just women, men are standing up and saying, this is a problem. It's the fault. We like to point fingers and place blame, and a lot of times we'll do it on ourselves, and that's not always the case. It's usually not the case.
Right. So how did you start to come to terms with yours?
It took me a really long time to come to terms with mine. I was one of the women who said, okay, this wasn't an assault. I remember when it first happened, the day after, one of my really good friends, he called me to check up on me. And he was like, just go to the gym, run it off. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to run it off.
Wait, fine. Go run it off. You had told him what happened?
Yes, kind of what happened. A gist. He was on the phone with me when I was right after the point crying in just complete distress. Poor guy. And so the next morning when he called me to check up on me, I guess I didn't really say exactly what was going on either, because when a trauma happens right afterwards, it's really hard to articulate what's going on.
That's true.
And so it was just a lot of tears. Kind of had an inkling, but not exactly. So when I woke up the next morning, I didn't want to say, oh yeah, this is what happened to me. What do I do? I was just like, oh, hey. And he was like, okay, well, whatever it is, just go run it off. It's fine. And I was like, you're right. I'm just going to go to the gym, do some cardio, run it off. It'll be fine. And I think that was the start of me minimizing what had happened to me and just pushing it back and pushing it away.
What made you bring it to the forefront?
Burying myself in work and school and everything that was supposed to be happening, relationships and friendships, and just I focused so much on being okay that it piled up and I just eventually just crashed on me. It took about 4 months for me to sit down and be like, you know what, this is what happened to me. And it had a lot to do with my surroundings. At the time, the Me Too campaign was coming out. And so that was kind of it was just in the back of my head, nagging, hey, that happened to you. And then I pushed it away. No, it didn't. I'm fine. I'm good. I'm leading. I'm involved. I'm working. Everything's great. I'm getting all A's. After it constantly being just put in front of me, I had to really sit down and be like, okay, this happened to me. Mm-hmm. So what am I going to do about it? Which sounds easier when I just said it, but it was a lot of tears and a lot of time and a lot of locking myself in a closet and crying in the corner trying to figure out what to do.
It's very confusing. A lot of girls come confused and not really able to articulate what happened. And a lot of people ask them, well, you should know what happened. But no, I mean, you don't necessarily realize.
No, yeah, and especially because it's part of, I hate to say it, but the culture, especially, so mine happened to me on my college campus. The statistic is 1 in 5 women will get assaulted on campus. You don't really think about it too much until 1, it's right in front of your face, but 2, you realize afterwards, like, this is part of the culture. And it shouldn't be, obviously, because it's something so dark, but our culture now is so, like, especially in college, drinking and hooking up and this and that those lines get so blurred that when it actually happens, I think that has a lot to do with, okay, well, did I get sexually assaulted? Like, was this my fault? Like, if you felt at any point uncomfortable and, like, said no at any point, like, yeah, you got assaulted, you know? And we just forget, stand up, I guess. I can't think of the words. Yeah.
I love that you said that, though, because consent, at any point you were uncomfortable. It doesn't matter what you went in with the intention to do. If at any point you said no and you felt uncomfortable, then it needs to stop. And I don't think we associate that. Like, well, okay, I went in with the intention of this, and so I deserved it, or, it went the way that it was supposed to, even though I changed my mind.
Right. And that's what I was going to say. You can change your mind.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh my God, absolutely. And I think a lot of people forget about that, especially girls and even men. Men are part of the statistic. I'm not going to be saying that it's all us, because it's not, but I know a lot of the times, we'll go into it having a good time, maybe you did have a drink. Mine happened after I turned 21 and I was feeling great and I was like, oh, I can go out and I can have some fun with my friends and, still be responsible, but you don't realize how quickly something can just turn into a bad situation.
So how did it feel like when you talked about it for the first time? What was that like?
I take 2 different times, because I talked about it right after it happened, and that was me trying to process and figure out, quote unquote, what happened,
and run it off.
And not figure it out, because I was like, it's okay, I'll go to the gym instead. When I finally said something, it was after I was taking a human sexuality class on campus. Little did I know, every semester in that class they show a documentary called The Hunting Grounds, and this documentary is about sexual assault on campus. Really bringing it to light. And so they show this film in class. You have to write a paper on it afterwards, reflecting on it. And I remember writing the paper and I was just so angry writing the paper. But I remember not putting my experience in there, because I knew if I put my experience in there, I would be obligated to report it, because that's what our teacher said in the beginning. She said, if you put that in there, like, wow, I'm gonna contact you, we're gonna report it. So I was like, I'm not gonna put that in there, because I still hadn't come to terms with it. And that's when I was like, oh, I'm not putting that in there. Something's wrong. And so saying it for the first time was really scary. I think it's still hard to talk about it. It was like opening the curtains, and that little light came in, and it helped me open the curtain more and more and more to tell more people. So I did it step by step. I had a list in my head of who I needed to tell, how I needed to get this done, because it was really affecting my mental health, like drastically affecting it. At one point, my mom knew something was wrong, but I didn't tell her. And so she's like, okay, well, are you depressed? Like, is this anxiety? What's going on? Do we need to go to the doctor? My mom was really concerned what it was. And I think that's when I finally opened up to my best friend. I called her crying. We were both going through a really hard time at the point. I was just, I don't know what's wrong. I don't want to leave my house. I'm just crying all the time. And my anxiety is just so peaked right now. And I don't know if it's depression or what. And she referred back to what had happened, my assault, because I had told her a gist of it. And she said because she's a psych major, so of course she went into therapy on me. She said, do you think that affected you more than you realized? And she said, do you think there was more to the story than you actually let on? And I was like, my brain just like exploded, and I was like, she's right again. And I think at that moment was when I kind of went into, you have that flight or fight mode. And initially I went into flight mode, like just go, like just keep going. It's fine. We're good. And then that kind of sparked my fight mode. to where I was able to make a plan of action. And I think that was just me trying to survive. You know, I realized what was going on, and I realized how much it was affecting me, and not just me, but the relationships I was in, those people around me. And I just decided to do something about it. But it was a slowly but surely thing. My mom was the last person I told, because I guess I had to figure out what to do before I could sit down and tell my mom what happened, because she's a very protective woman, like all moms are. But I was just like, oh my gosh, I have to tell my mom. I don't know what's going to happen. And I think that comes around with like, okay, like, is it going to be like, am I going to be shamed? Of course I'm not going to be shamed, but that's something that's in your head. That's one of the main things when it comes with like that guilt too, or did I do this? Society's telling me that my jeans were too tight. So what part did I play in it? And I was focusing so much on that, I couldn't focus on what was going on in my heart. And my heart was just shattered, I guess you could say. So
Juliana, did you ever feel not supported by some people you told and supported by some?
You know, when I think back on it, because like I said, that list, man, I went down it and everyone was hard. I didn't feel not supported by anyone I told, which was such a blessing. And I think it had a lot to do with like the community I was involved in and the people I worked with. I think more so I was scared to tell my immediate friend group, I guess you could say. It was hardest for me to tell people in that culture, because that's who I thought would shame me. They'd be like, well, you had a glass of wine, or well this and well that, and it's because it's part of the culture. So I think that was hardest for me. But when it came to the people on my list that I knew, whether they were my boss or where they were someone in charge of a group that I led, or my mom, those were the people that mattered. And telling them, every one of them was so supportive and understanding and just helping me figure out what the next step was to take.
So how did you think to have a strategy of who you needed to tell?
You know, I'm not the list type, which is very funny to me that that's what like happened in my brain. That's what my brain did, because I'm not the most organized person on the planet. And so actually having the organization, I think, helped me hold on to something. It was a step, kind of. So every person I checked off on my list was me taking one step up, one more step up, one more step towards something. So who was the first person I told? I think I was some coworkers, which gave me the courage to tell my boss, which gave me the courage to tell our campus minister, which gave me the courage to tell my mom. So it was just step by step by step, and then full circle around, okay, well, what are we going to do next? Are we going to go to a sexual assault center? And are we going to tell someone? And are we going to talk to a counselor? And so that was the next thing. And telling everyone helped me be okay with talking to a counselor, because there's a really bad stigma about going to therapy and counseling and asking for help. So I think the list helped me just get to the point where I could ask a professional for help.
There's a couple of things I want to jump back to, and then I, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about what that was like stepping into that counseling center. But the first thing is you said your friend had talked to you and asked you if there was a little bit more to what happened to you when you were afraid to go outside, when you were afraid to do all these things. What were you associating with your not wanting to leave the house, your not wanting to do things? Before she said that to you, what were you connecting that to?
I think a deeper part of me knew what it was connected to, but on the surface, I'm pretty sure I connected it to, at the time I was working about 3 jobs. I was taking a full credit load. I was involved in, I think it was 3 different organizations, and I was trying to get into a new relationship, and I was trying to keep my relationships going with my friends. And so I just credited it to the stress of that, caving from it. And at the time, I think there were some other things going on. Our life, like my childhood dog was passing away, and so I don't know if that loss triggered what I lost in the assault, but something triggered it to where I was realizing that what I was connecting wasn't what was actually going on.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I think we find as a common thread throughout the stories that are shared is when something dark and unplanned happens like that, that is, as women, how we tend to cope. We pack on the workload, we pack on the family life, we pack on all these things to say we're okay, we're okay, we're okay. And then we come to that breaking point of, okay, I'm not okay now, what am I going to do with this?
Yeah, I think one of mine and a friend, it's not a good saying. It can apply sometimes, but one of our sayings going through college was fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
And so I think my brain just went into fake it till you make it. Just fake it till you make it. It'll be okay eventually. And with a wound this deep, which comes with any type of assault or addiction or those like that darkness of the world that it can offer you and that we are unfortunately submerged in sometimes because it's out of our control, you can't fake it till you make it. It just breaks you at some point, and it did. I literally went from going 100%, probably 110%, to I couldn't leave my house. I locked myself in my room and I just stayed there. I wouldn't answer calls. I wouldn't answer text messages. I just didn't want anything to do with the world. And it was just like the darkness kind of just collapsed on. So I think that breaking point is kind of what makes you hit the very bottom and you break. And you're still there afterwards because that's just how life is. You're still there after the break, even though you feel like you're not going to be there. And that's when you can lift your head and be like, okay, what next?
Yeah, and that's so beautiful. Because knowing you and knowing how strong and resilient you are and outgoing, it's hard to envision you being a person who couldn't go out or return messages. Like, that's just not
it's very out of character.
Personality. Yes, very.
I think that's how people knew something was wrong. It's very out of character for me.
So tell us a little bit, we don't have much more time left, but tell us a little bit about what it was like to take that first step to go for counseling services.
It was very, it was scary. Oh my gosh, terrifying. I remember we tried a counseling center first, and I was very turned off at the service, I guess you could say, those who were working there and their lack in, I guess, compassion. And it was more of like okay, can I fit you on the calendar? And I was like, what? Okay, this is terrifying.
Right, I've just hit rock bottom. I've broke, and you're looking
at
your
your
calendar.
Telling me? It's fine. Okay, whatever. And so after that, I was like, I'm done. We'll try again in 2 years. It's fine. The next thing that happens, then I'll go to counseling. People wouldn't let me do that. So
good.
We found another place, and it's La Piñon. Love it so much. They are a nonprofit. They know what is going on in the world and on campuses, like the darkness of it, and they know how to help. And so when I walked into La Piñon, they were very like, okay, they knew how to deal with it. Now thinking back on it, I'm like, what did they even tell me? I don't remember. But I felt safe when I walked into that place, and I felt able to open up and tell them what happened, and I knew that they were going to help. And it was hard. I remember talking to my campus minister, and he said, it's going to be hard, and you will get to the finish line eventually, but it's going to take a while to get there. And it did. It took so long. It's taken almost a year, but I accredit a lot of it to counseling at La Piñon. Counseling in general. Everyone needs to do it. So everyone needs a counselor. I 10 out of 10 recommend it.
So it sounds like that's what you think helped you the most.
Honestly, besides my faith and my support system, counseling has so much to do with it, because we don't realize how much an effect mental health has until there's something wrong with your mental health, whether it's depression or anxiety or anything else going on. And sometimes it's so big that your mom can't help you or your best friend can't help you. You need that professional. And sometimes that stranger, it's actually really nice to be a stranger, because they don't know what happened in your whole life. And they're not going to go back and tell your friends or your mom or your family. To just sit there and listen to you and to have the right things to say, even though there's really not a right thing to say, but those tools and that knowledge to really help your healing process. I think it's so important. So
I do too. So how do you feel now, whether or not that's changed your view in relationships?
It had definitely affected my view of relationships. I think I don't want to credit part of my assault to being so trusting, because I'm so trusting of people. Oh yeah, I can go have a conversation with this person. They're not going to turn on me, show me the darkness of the world. So I think it's definitely made me more guarded. Maybe not in the best way either. Sometimes I really sit down and I think about it and I'm like, I should probably start taking down some of these walls, because not every person is out to hurt me in that way. But it's a process, and I think it's always going to be a process. I'm going to carry it for a really long time, if not like for the rest of my life. But it's okay that it's a battle and it's going to keep you fighting, because that's just what you have to do. If it's not one thing, it's another thing that you have to keep fighting. So
Right.
yeah.
Wow. Well, Juliana, it has been a pleasure having you on. You are an amazing woman. Sharing your story is incredible. You know, the ability to open up that vulnerability is huge. And I know it's not easy. You make it look easy. And you make it sound easy. And so we want to thank you for that, because we know that truly that is not the case. You know, it takes that courage to step forward in this. And so thank you. If you've heard today's podcast and you feel like you're ready to take the next step and find your turning point in that broken and shattered on the ground, there are national hotlines for abuse. There's one that is 1-800-656-HOPE. And that's 1-800-656-HOPE. They will connect you to a local assault center in your area based on the phone that you call off of. And you are not required to give any information. They will help you completely 100% confidential. If you go in and tell them you don't want to give them your name or you don't want to show them identification, they will serve you and get you counseling and the help that you need. They do it at your pace and whatever you're comfortable with. So again, that number is 1-800-656-HOPE. 7 out of 10 rapes are committed by someone you know. You're not alone in this. So definitely, if you feel like you're at that point to seek help, reach out to that number and get connected to somebody that can really lead you in the right direction. Please feel free to leave us a comment or review at the end of the podcast. It'll help us going forward. You can also like us on Facebook or follow us on Instagram. And remember, stars can't shine without darkness.